So, hi everyone. We're doing this assignment on social work um, and the CPS system in Texas. I want to just briefly talk about our slide presentation. I know it looks all fun and it is, but it is a serious topic we're talking about. So, I just wanted to mention we're kind of using it as a way of humanizing. We're talking about something very serious, but we're also, you're working with kids and stuff like that. So, we wanted to also humanize the topic and not just talk about numbers and everything like that. So kind of a brief overview of what our presentation is going to look like. We're going to talk to a little bit about the practice area, about some intersectionality, disparity, talk about the code of ethics a little bit, the client experience, and we're also going to talk about a social worker that we interviewed who worked in the CPS system. So, alrighty, so first we want to talk about kind of what is CPS. So the Child Protective Services is a section of your state's social services unit. Some states have different ones, but for Texas it is CPS, and that is in charge of evaluation, examination, and mediation in instances of reports of confirmed childhood mistreatment and abandonment or neglect. So why is it important? It's important because CPS that works to make sure that and place children in stable and safe environments and families. And this is done through whether defending and sheltering children from maltreatment and neglect. It also strives to maintain a family section. So a big part of CPS is like trying to keep families connected and keep children in their families the best they can. And it works to stop the continuation of maltreatment or neglect if the child's permanent guardian is doing so. And this CPS includes children who don't have guardians or people who watch out for them. So it's basically just making sure that they're being treated the best they can and making them the most safe environment they can be in. And why does CPS need social work or social work aspects is because they evaluate speculative instances of maltreatment and neglect. They help children and parents in recognizing issues that exist in the home so they can work on them. They offer at-home therapies and counseling and meaningful aid so that children are able to remain in their original homes. Like I said, a big part of it is trying to keep families connected. They arrange for families to have access and awareness to a bunch of different services, which we'll talk more about later. They challenge the legal system for transfer the child to safer environments if it needs to happen. And they spread awareness information about childhood maltreatment and neglect. So we want to talk a little bit about the numbers, go a little bit of the demographics. So just the contacts made with Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, which includes children, there was 736,777 just contacts alone in 2020. And we have some more numbers in the next slide, which we're going to talk about because some of the numbers are shocking. But so we looked at a few different things which are on this site where you can look at the CPS system. And when you look at placements for just March, so placements could be whether they were moved into foster homes, they got put into emergency shelters, childcare services, residential treatment movement within the CPS system. There's like 417 ages 0 to 2, 435 ages 3 to 5, and like so on. The numbers increase as they get older, and this is just placements for only what happened in March of 2021. So I thought that I would include that in there just to kind of show, how much is going on, how many people are moving around in the age groups. And then here's some more just kind of numbers. As of 2020, there was over like 75,000 children and 29,000 families that were served by CPS or had been like helped by the system. There were over 16,000 removals and 60 voluntary relinquishments, which you go for your children. Basically, voluntarily do that. We had over 45,000 children in conservatorship, which we'll talk about again more later. We had 45,000 placements of children in substitute care, whether that is foster care, etc. Over 5,000 children awaiting adoption, and only 1,000 families who have adopted and foster homes. And then there were also over 5,000 adoption placements. So just as of 2020, what was going on within the CPS system. Again, this is more of a chart. So we have just entering as of 2021, and this is kind of based on August. I wanted to put a graph in kind of to show also like the demographics in terms of like race and ethnicity. So 19% of the children entering the CPS system is African American, 24% is Anglo. So it kind of just shows possibly maybe there is a problem there with we have, minorities entering the system at a high rate in 2020. So we're going to also look more into that later, but kind of I just wanted to show some of the statistics of the people entering the system as of 2020. And we have another slide that says people exiting the system in 2020. So it's similar statistics with that. We have 20% African Americans leaving the system, 23% Anglo people completing, whether this means aging out at age of 18, and we kind of just have the statistics on that. So again, it's something we're definitely going to look at later with the in terms of race and just kind of what's going on within the system.
All right. And so as a social worker in CPS, you can be found working in many different areas. And so, like our slide says, they can be found in the homes of their clients. They can be found in central office buildings. They can be in courtrooms, hospitals, and schools. Really, social workers with CPS can be everywhere. They are expected to travel to their clients. And the settings matter because the setting a social worker is working in makes an impact on not only the social worker, but the client as well. CPS social workers are constantly on the move and therefore should be individuals who are okay with working in different areas. More importantly, these social workers meet clients where they are. These are often in places where the clients don't feel safe. CPS social workers have to be willing to be the source of comfort to clients, regardless of what area they're working in. Because a lot of times, like these social workers are going into homes where children have been abused or neglected. And so that's just something to be cognizant of for the social worker. But then also looking at their relationship with the client, they're going to need to be a source of comfort for this client. And so different social work jobs you can have within the CPS system. There's investigative jobs, and per year, there's about 2,440 social work jobs for investigation in the United States, or not in the United States, in Texas. And then for family-based safety services, there's about 1,036 positions, so a little less. Then conservatorship, there's about 2,068 designated roles, and then other other positions within CPS, there's about 503. And so just to kind of give a breakdown of what each of those jobs does, investigation work. So CPS investigators work to determine if children are living in safe households. They interview and investigate to see if children are being abused or neglected. These jobs include responding to children in crisis, removing children from areas of harm, developing a plan to keep the child safe, testifying in court, documenting cases of neglect and abuse, and much more. And so they're kind of the ones that are in and out trying to understand if children are safe or not. Family-based safety services work. These workers help families who have already been investigated by CPS. So it's kind of like the next step after an investigator has been with the family. So this social worker mostly spends time working with the family members to create and keep a safe environment for the children in the household. So they discuss income, insurance, money management, develop close relationships with the family, and educate parents to change their behaviors. So this is kind of like once a family understands that they are not necessarily in a safe place with keeping their children together, these social workers help them game plan ways that they can change their lifestyle to be able to provide for their children and keep their family together in one household. Conservatorship work. So once a child has been removed from their home, a conservator social worker is assigned to them. So this social worker determines the individual needs of the child they're working with, conducts home studies and new placement, helps children with the transition, and meets monthly with the child and family to ensure that everything is working out well. So this is kind of like a third step social worker, I guess. So if a child has been investigated or a family has been investigated by an investigator, and then it is determined that the child does need to leave the home, they're assigned a conservator. And this is their social worker that helps make sure they're transitioning out of their unsafe home life well, and finding a new position. So then other work in CPS includes special investigators, foster adoptive home development, preparation for adult living, and human services technicians.
So a very important factor in the impact on children from CPS and foster care system is intersecting identities. Some of these identities that people have are ethnicity and race. So the United States and Texas government systems are ingrained with systemic racism, which can lead to numerous disadvantages to non-white children and teenagers. Sexuality, so children who have been taken in by the system are already trying to understand where they can fit into a home. Adding sexuality that isn't accepted 100% of the time in society can add to more emotional problems. Gender identities as well. Children who are going through transition in their gender identities don't receive the same advocacy or support throughout this transition because social workers are working on other needs being met, and as well as geographic location. Because of socioeconomic levels in different areas, the physical location of the child can have a lot of impact on the care they receive. All of these identities can lead to additional barriers in finding adequate care. So the effects of intersecting identities is that clients may force limitations or aggression as a cause of two or more identities being met. For example, provided by Informed Children is that of Jamel, who is a 15-year-old Black, British, and of Caribbean heritage. He is a victim of peer-on-peer sexual abuse. He is 6 foot tall and is often described as aggressive and has low attendance at school. It is likely that Jamel has experienced racism and biased behaviors, not just based on his race and ethnicity, but also of how this intersects with his gender. So he is a Black male. Therefore, Jamel is 9 times more likely to be wrongly identified for being in a gang, more likely to experience stop and search. And in terms of how these characteristics intersect with age, he's likely to be perceived as more of adult-like and less need of support compared to other children his age. So these experiences may influence Jamel's sense of safety to feel comfortable around receiving and accessing support from professionals as a victim of sexual abuse.
So moving on. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I was just gonna add that so why understanding the effects of intersecting identities is important. So according to intersectionality as a useful tool, when understanding the effects of power relations and how gender, sexuality, class, and race intersect and reinforce each other, the social worker can develop an alternative way of thinking and alternative actions. And by being more conscious of how social structures affect social work and reinforce oppression and power relations, it is possible for social workers to change both the way they think and act, therefore providing better care for their clients.
Right, thank you. And then moving on to like issues of racial disparity that we've seen in the CPS system as a whole, and like specifically like in Texas and then in Austin. So based off our conversation with our social worker and like research that we've done, we noticed that Black and Hispanic clients struggle more often with finding the resources and accessing the ones that they need. Like once they get presented with the resources, and part of this is due to systemic barriers for them. Like a lot of times it's harder for people like minority families and individuals to get access to things due to just like requirements that come up, whether it's like income requirements or like being discriminated against because of location or things like that, but also cultural aspects play a part into accessing those resources, because sometimes people, put up walls and don't feel like it's a safe space enough for them to go and access those resources, or don't feel comfortable doing them because of their history with trying to access them before. But once social workers are able to make them feel like the environment is safe and really help make them feel supported, oftentimes like those walls, like they're able to break them down and like they find the resources that they need. Another thing that I noticed was that Black children are vastly overrepresented in the CPS system compared to other groups. And as we saw with like the first graph that was there, almost like 20% of like incoming clients are Black, while Black individuals only make up 13% of the US population. So that right there is an like you can see how it's overrepresented. And in the state of Texas specifically, Black individuals only make up 11%. So it's almost doubled by the representation in CPS system. They make up 20% of CPS investigations, 20% of children who are removed from their families, again, compared to white children. Out of every 1,000 Black children, 4.3 were removed from their homes in 2019, and compared to white children, that was only 2.5, and then Hispanic, it was 1.9. So you can really see the differences there in relation to race and removals. And part of this is what I found is that there's more different levels of acceptable risk when it comes to white families versus Black families. So if there's it takes less for a child to get removed from, say, like a Black or Hispanic family than a white family. They'll accept, like it takes more for a white child to get removed, if that makes sense, from a house. And then of course, like when it comes to like racial things, a part that plays into that, the systemic and like the conditions that families get into in order for them not to be able to provide for the child is due to a lot of the poverty, like among the Black populations, well, Hispanic populations in Texas. And a lot of this is due to, most of it, almost all of it is due to past and present discrimination in housing, in employment, in education, in the healthcare system that we see. And that correlates with the high removal of minority kids from their families. And something else is that Travis County actually has the highest rates of racial disproportionality in the CPS system in Texas. Black children account for 7% of the population of Travis County, but 20% of removals, which is so crazy. And a lot of that, and a big reason that we notice that moms are scared of asking help for mental health and substance abuse when they need it, because they're scared that their kids will be taken away. And so a really big thing that like helps mitigate this is being, I guess, very open with resources that social work provide to families, so that mothers feel less afraid that their kids are going to be taken away from them. And so next we have like just some graphs representing the stats that I had mentioned. So percent of reports to CPS compared to other races. And then the next one shows the removals, as well as like investigations that are opened up, and like Black children make such a big chunk of that when the population in Texas is only 11. Moving on, we're going to discuss the ethical issues related to the Code of Ethics of the Code of Social Work. And so based off our conversation with our social worker and then like our research, we noticed that the Code of Ethics, social workers don't feel limited by the Code of Ethics, and they don't feel like the Code of Ethics limits their capability to do their job. However, it really does place boundaries on relationships that social workers can build with their clients, just to make sure that there doesn't become conflicts of interest, or people don't get attached, and then like that can like just create problems in the future. And a common like ethical issue that social workers are put in, is clients wanting to offer them gifts. Like social workers aren't able to accept anything from their clients, whether it's like food or gifts, invitations to things, anything of monetary value, or even if it's not, like they aren't able to give it. And a lot of times, like that's the only way that clients feel like they can show gratitude to their social workers. And so something that social workers have seen when they're not able to accept this, like people can take it personally and feel like the social worker like didn't care as much about them as they thought, or just feel like not as appreciated, which can hurt the relationship. And social workers are often unable to remain updated on their former clients because they can't like can't stay in contact with them, or really like go and look them up after like they've done their job, I guess, once their job is done with them. It's a specific like instance that our social worker faces, that they had a Chinese client, and part of their culture is giving, and food specifically, like being able to offer like food or a meal to someone that you're really grateful to. And there was a family that brought so much food for the social work office, but they weren't able to accept it. They had to say no, and then it was really obvious that the family was hurt by it, even though the social workers did appreciate the gesture and really wish they could have like accepted that and like ate with them and really just like have that time together, but it simply wasn't allowed. And so with that, like it could hurt the client's feelings a bit, but with reassuring them of why you can accept it and like showing them that you do see how grateful they are in other ways, that helps like the relationship still stay strong.
So we also have a little bit on client's perspective. Here is Ashley Rhodes Carter, who is a social worker herself and the author of a memoir, The Little Words, which is based on her story and her experience in foster care. Ashley Rhodes says her mother was a teenage mother who got pregnant while living in a group home in foster care. The cycle played out and I ended up in foster care myself, but I was able to break that cycle. As a child, I spent almost 10 years in foster care, bouncing around 14 different homes until I was finally adopted at the age of 12. I later learned that roughly a quarter of my caregivers were already or eventually became convicted felons as a result of problems with drugs, alcohol, violence, or pedophilia. And it was not the most ideal of circumstances, but I was able to find refuge at school. Even though I changed schools at least twice a year until 7th grade, I had teachers who encouraged me to remain dedicated to my academics. She relates that as a foster care child, she was moved from home to home, and oftentimes she would wake up in a different bed than the one she woke up in. She slept in, and until she was appointed to a child advocate, she found help and she found her adoptive parents. And she does say that the system was willing to turn a blind eye into families that were obviously not meeting the needs of the children. However, she says that this has changed so much over the years.
Awesome. And then we're just going to talk about the social worker that we got to speak with. So her name was Kimberly Anderson, and she is a CPI investigator. Okay, so Kimberly Anderson works as an investigator for children. She works with children and their families to determine if their home environment is a safe place for all members of the family. And she told us she connects best with the parents because they know the needs of their children. And as a parent herself, she can relate to them easier and better, I guess. She pointed out a few flaws that she sees in the system, which are that she feels her team can be restricted in certain areas based on policies. And she feels like the government officials and policymakers can't quite understand that policy isn't the best way to go about making a difference for the children when they aren't the ones seeing them up close and in their environments. Kimberly gave us a lot of really awesome insightful things that we've incorporated throughout our presentation. But like I talked about earlier, she is an investigator for children. And so a big part of her job is going to the different homes of children, meeting with their families, trying to understand if the child is safe, if the families can continue to take care of their children. And she does like help them make plans to try to keep their families together. And she just works in and out of homes, in courtrooms, and she does a lot of really good work. So that is our presentation. Yeah, our emails are here in case there's any questions. And then we do have our citations. So I think that is it. Awesome. Okay, cool.